It's a nightclub. Nah, I'm just kidding. Who killed WCW? Welcome to Final Bell Media. That's Ellis. I'm Andrew. That's Juice. And that's Corey. My kicks are my fix. Saunders, he gets the full introduction. Okay, nobody else does. Who killed WCW? We are finally back on the air. It's a Thursday. We all saw the first episode. I hope you guys and girls did too. I even listened to Eric Bischoff and his podcast. I mean, Eric took a lot of questions. It really wasn't about the episode, but I digress. Eric's a good dude. Ellis, Juice, Corey. The first episode of Who Killed WCW. I mean, we didn't really get much, but what we did find out in this miniseries, I believe, is this is going to be the first time outside of the WWE umbrella. We're going to get maybe some dirt here on what really happened in WCW. We'll get to that. Ellis, how are you? I'm good, man. Just chilling, making technology work. That's the name of the game, right? That's the name of the game. Yeah, the WCW historians are below us, but somebody that I consider probably Mr. WCW is the guy with the backwards Newport hat. That's his MO. It's his trademark. That is Juice Springsteen. Juice, how the hell are you? Long time.
Pretty good. We got the WCW polo going. I practically work for the company. I might be the last fan on earth that supports this company 20 plus years after they folded. Happy to be here with you, Ellis, Drew, Corey. It's great to be here.
Does Ted still send you checks?
I can't disclose how much money are on the checks, but they are now getting to the point where I'm sending him the checks.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Listen, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. Remember that, kids. Corey, always a pleasure. Man? How are you doing?
Fantastic. More importantly, how are you guys?
I'm good. I'm ready for those Kobe's.
Yeah. But I'm picking mine up tomorrow. But I'm hoping for the best.
Ellis, listen, Corey made me a sneaker guy, a sneakerhead, whatever the hell you want to call it nowadays.
I know. I've seen the group chat messages, and I love how excited you are to get socks.
Listen, I just got bodegas. I mean, Corey said they were good.
Yeah. No.
Speaking of bodegas, WCW used to be ran out of one. No, I'm just kidding. All right, episode 1 is in the books from Vice TV. The guys and girls from Dark Side of the Ring, the producers. We had Danny Garcia and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. $7 production had a hand in this too. Let's talk about that. Let's start there. Is it interesting to see The Rock on a WCW doc? Obviously, you don't turn down The Rock. If The Rock wants to be on your show, you let him have at it. I mean, Rock held the WWE WCW champion.
Yeah, he was former WCW champion.
Yeah, right.
Drew, what are you talking about? He's the perfect person.
Yeah, Juice can claim that The Rock was a WCW champion. I digress. Let's talk about this involvement with The Rock. The Rock is kind of the enemy. He was over in WWF at the time, and he said, why can't we do some of the stuff that, WCW is doing? Why can't we do that here in WWE? So it's interesting. Juice, I'll go to you first. The Rock's involvement, is it a plus or a negative for you since you're like the WCW guy?
Honestly, I think it's a great thing for WCW's history, the lineage. I mean, you mentioned it. Outside of a WWE umbrella, this is really the first time where we get strictly WCW talent. Ted Turner's son, of all people, Brad Siegel, Neil Pruitt, so many different people involved with WCW, from wrestlers to behind the scenes people, to The Rock. And The Rock, as you just said, was like, look, they're doing all this cool stuff. I want to do that. We can't because we can't. And that was the Vince McMahon edict, that at the time it was just, gimmicks and we're just going to play it straight and tape things. And WCW comes along, changes everything. The Attitude Era happens. And now WCW is no longer here. I think The Rock being he was at the top of his game when WCW was winning, so right. He saw it firsthand. And I think it's a great perspective to come from now.
Yeah, and how things changed, right? All of a sudden, WCW had some handcuffs on them, and WWF at the time was off to the races doing stuff that you could only see on Jerry Springer and Howard Stern and South Park. So, I mean, listen, it's the tale of, 2 years, realistically. But I agree with you, Juice. Seeing The Rock on there is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, DJ, as I like to call him, for all you jerk-offs out there. Now, I'm only kidding.
Oh, yeah, AB.
AB, that's right. So, listen, The Rock's involvement is a good one. Corey, I asked Juice. I'll ask you as well. Plus or a negative? I mean, The Rock involved in this, plus or negative?
The Rock was a mainstream star in wrestling at the time that WCW was, doing their best business. Of course, he's a great person to do this. He was on the other side. We have gotten so many of these documentaries on the people, and obviously, and rightfully so, you talk to people that were there in WCW, but we're really seeing, a perspective from somebody, especially somebody that's actually producing the documentary. We're getting a perspective from the other side now also, with him talking about how, hey, like you just mentioned, we weren't able to do this. They were able to do this. I wish we could have done stuff like that, and how it flip-flopped. And now we're able to see, coming from his point of view, what they were doing over in WWE and what they were watching with WCW as it was dwindling down.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing here. I want to thank all of 277 plus that are watching us here on this WCW show. We appreciate the love and support. Ellis, I know you're a big Rock guy. Obviously, WWE, WWF through and through. I'm a big fan of Dwayne The Rock Johnson myself. He was a man who really transcended the business in terms of what he was doing. We are still seeing that today, whether it be through Ricky Starks or other people. Ellis, his involvement in he being Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Who Killed WCW and obviously producing it. I'll ask you a more business savvy question. Do you think we're going to see The Rock allow this to be produced the way that a lot of people want it to be produced and not kind of corporatized or telling a narrative?
To be honest with you, it's hard to tell from the first episode. The way that it was kind of aiming was Eric Bush. I don't want to spoil this. I don't want to jump ahead, but it was pointed at one thing. I'm hoping as we continue on with the series, where we're getting a different POV as we continue to tell the story, right? So we're talking about like Eric Bischoff, and we're talking about executives. We're talking about who else, any of the stakeholders who could potentially be responsible. But I'm hoping that we see that kind of storytelling moving forward. But if you look at The Rock being in charge here or being the face here, to me, this is a signal of something a little bit more different. This is The Rock, because typically we see other backstage people kind of leading the conversation. The fact that we're seeing The Rock do this is kind of, again, he's doing a lot with his brand to make sure that you're like, hey, we know he was a wrestling superstar. Now he's a megastar doing all this stuff, and now he's part of the board. It's almost as if he is going to be the face of what the history of professional wrestling is.
Well, and I think that's a great point, Ellis. I think that this stamps $7 productions into the wrestling realm because they did the territories with the guys from Dark Side of the Ring, Tales from the Territories, and I enjoyed that. Listen, the Dark Side of the Ring stuff is just that. It's dark. They're not painting professional wrestling for the most part in the most brightest lights. Besides what we saw, but I believe it was Earthquake. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, was the Earthquake documentary. Yeah. That one was very, very positive. But for the most part, what they're doing here is they are showing you the dark side of the ring. WCW had a lot of dark sides. Now, WCW had a lot of positives. It transcended the business, which we're going to get into. But I'm on the side that Dwayne The Rock Johnson and $7 Productions are really going to try and cement themselves here in the wrestling landscape from their production company with this 4-part miniseries, and they couldn't have teamed up with a better crew than the Dark Side of the Ring guys. I'm telling you.
I did that last part. I was with you all the way to that point because, again, Vice has a reputation
for sure. I get that.
It has a, so I agree with everything you just said. That's the last part.
To counterpoint that, Vice has a reputation, but WWE has a reputation. They won. So everything up until this point that we've seen about WCW, and this is not just coming from a WCW loyalist. This is coming from someone I can look at it unbiased. WCW was not looked at fondly. It's look how many times they failed. Look, they were good for this little moment, but who's here now? And it's just unfortunate that all throughout the years, you get this DVD, The Rise and Fall of WCW, which was similar to The Rise and Fall of ECW. And even so, The Rise and Fall of ECW was almost put into a higher echelon of prestige and how it was viewed.
Well, there was a reason for that, Juice.
Yeah, and
they put that DVD out, and they
worked with them.
Well, they had a pay-per-view like 7 months later because of the pop. I mean, there was all a plan there, all a plan. Then the brand launched. They were never relaunching WCW. Vince McMahon was never going to allow the relaunch of WCW. No matter who tells you that was never going to happen. And I agree with you. This is outside of the WWE umbrella. It's outside of the scope, and winners get to rewrite history. That's just how it is. They get to write their own history. So that's what WWE has done. Let's talk about the first episode here. This basically kicked off with wrestlers, past and present, and some executives giving their eulogies for WCW. The most famous one that we heard is somebody that I consider one of the best wrestlers ever to do it, but he seems to be a little bitter at times. Bret the Hitman Hart said, Bret Hart said, "Thanks for nothing, go F yourself," which was clipped 1,000,001 times all over social media, all over the internet. Obviously, Bret made a boatload of money from WCW. Vince kind of hand-delivered Bret the Hitman Hart to WCW because I think Vince was very smart and knew that, and he said it on the Wrestling with Shadows documentary, they'll never know what to do with the Bret the Hitman Hart, and they didn't. So let's stop and start there. Bret Hart saying that. Juice, Corey, Ellis. From the business side, Ellis, I want to ask you this. Was Bret Hart the worst investment that WCW ever made?
Holy crap. Oh, what kind of you know
well,
what?
They didn't see much residuals from the man, and I love them, but they didn't.
I'm going to tell you, investment is based on decisions that result back to a ROI. And if you can,
that's return on investment, folks.
Yes, and I cannot say that Bret Hart was a poor investment. It was Bret Hart's purchase. Sorry, not purchase. I'm not calling it an object, but the acquisition of Bret Hart and bringing it to the fold was mismanaged.
Yes, poor execution for the excellence of execution. I agree with you there, 100%. Poor execution, which is going to be something we talk about probably ad nauseum here. So, Juice, I flip to you. Bret Hart, when he left in 1997 from the WWF coming off the Montreal Screwjob, I thought to myself, man, this is going to be massive for WCW. Yeah. Even as a 13-year-old, I was 12. A 12-year-old, I was like, man, this is going to be something. It's going to be cool. And what happened? They made him a goddamn referee in a match. I mean, you couldn't have booked it any worse. So I ask you, Bret Hart, the worst decision, the worst mismanagement that WCW has ever had?
It's crazy, when they brought in the first whole half hour of this first part of the series shows the NWO and how it became a thing. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, guys that done with their contracts. They even showed Lex Luger on Nitro. They didn't even know that he was out of his contract in the WWF at the time. Shows up on Nitro. Bret Hart literally gets taken away from the WWF with arguably one of the most heinous things you could do back then, which was taint the business, and you didn't do business the right way. And you could have presented Bret in such a different light with that attitude, for lack of a better term, that you did with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, to have him be pissed off. He could have came in and did a shoot and just tore down Vince, something to that effect. But like you said, they made him the special guest enforcer, not really a referee. He only came in whenever the botched ending happened, although I will give Nick Patrick one of the greatest sells in the history of professional wrestling with the punch that Bret gave him. But to not have Bret immediately in the wrestling realm, or at least cutting promos against the guy who, Eric Bischoff said, I want to drive a stake through Vince McMahon's heart. And Vince gave him one of the guys that a lot of us thought undervalued in WWE. Here you go. And he did nothing. He did nothing.
Not even did Vince McMahon give Eric Bischoff Bret the Hitman Hart. He gave him a tailor-fitted angle for the competition show, and they made him a special guest referee, which will all tie into what I'm doing. A lot of people are like, why are you starting with Bret? You'll see. Stay tuned. That's why this crew and this media is going to be the best in the business. Corey, Bret Hart. I know you're a Bret guy. So am I. I like Sean as well.
Don't.
We kind of got, we got the business from Ellis. We got the history from Juice. I want to ask you the fandom question here.
Sure.
Bret going over to WCW. Where were you at? What were you thinking? What was your mindset at that point?
So yeah, I was 13 at that time. Just saw the Montreal Screwjob, and to piggyback on a couple of things that were going on because this show has been great. One, way back when what Juice was talking about, it always seems like WCW gets a yeah but type of documentary, that it's a yeah, they did great things, but they ultimately failed. And that's the thing you keep getting with them. And talking about this now, at least we can shed a little bit of positive light, because I think a lot of stuff gets looked at in hindsight with them. And you do have to kind of pull out the good things. And I will say one thing about the Bret Hart thing, though, about him going over to WCW. I want to say at that Starcade, I think he was the referee for Zbyszko and Bischoff as well, if I'm not mistaken.
He was
at Starcade.
And he ran in during the main event of Hogan and Sting, correct?
Yes, and he did. Yes. So looking at that at that time, even at 13, I'm looking at it like he went over to WCW. You can see that, oh my goodness, he's going to bury the WWF. And like y'all mentioned, they brought him over as a referee. Him not in today's world, if a signing like that happens, he's having a match immediately.
Yeah, unless he's hurt. Unless he's hurt. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't hurt.
He had the match.
Yeah. The documentary here, the 4-part miniseries, obviously, like I said, started off with the eulogy. We heard from Medusa, Lunger Blaze. We heard from Bret. We heard from Goldberg. We heard from Booker T. We heard from Eric Bischoff. We heard from Kevin Nash, to name a few. Mm-hmm. They really started this whole thing off with Eric Bischoff and how he got into the wrestling business, and then all of a sudden how he went into becoming an announcer with WCW, started with the AWA and Vern Gagne, and then went into WCW, and then eventually became the president. And Eric Bischoff took what was a wrestling company that wasn't even mentioned in the same breath as WWF, because when people talked about wrestling, and Eric said this, they referred to professional wrestling as, WWF, which is a lot of people today who don't watch the product religiously still, you're watching WWF and WWE or whatever, they don't even consider it wrestling. There's no AEW, there's no this, there's no that. It's just WWF.
Similar with MMA. They just call it UFC.
Right, UFC. Right. Mm-hmm. Nobody calls it MMA. You're 100% right. To that point, Eric Bischoff really took WCW from a wrestling company to a television production company, in my opinion. He produced television. He wasn't just producing professional wrestling. But this started off as a Eric Bischoff documentary, which was interesting for me. Are we going to see Eric painted in the brightest of lights here? Because the Vice guys and the $7 production guys and girls are very smart here. They're hooking everybody, and then we're going to see episodes 2, 3, and 4. You don't give everything away on the first episode. But let's talk about Eric and Eric's rise, and then Eric's positivity here that he was produced as or shown as in this first episode. Ellis, Eric being produced in this positive light, I get it. The man really did take WCW to new heights, but there's a lot of blame to be thrown around to Eric Bischoff, is there not?
Dude, that's not what this is. Man, if we watch what we saw at the beginning of the documentary, and that's where our mind goes to, I have a problem with that. We saw the story that every person in corporate America or business should be focused on doing.
Sure.
You go somewhere, you work your butt off, you look outside the box, you move up, and then you see opportunity, you go after it, you move on up again. This is not that story to me was kind of saying, guess what? The story of WCW failing isn't a wrestling story. This is a business story. Okay, yeah. We're not talking about, again, the fact that this man said, I didn't come from the business. I didn't. I know, and we talk about ratings, the guy figured out the KPIs, the key performance indicators that are necessary to be successful in his job, and moved up. Was successful, moved up. Successful, moved up. Took more ownership, moved up. We can say whatever we want to say about Eric Bischoff. People can say, well, he's the reason he's a jerk. He got the fucking job done.
Yeah, no,
and people aren't. And people are again. It's like that old Triple H speech. It's like people out here hate money, hate greed, all this stuff. the big things that people are afraid to take big risks and move on up and do what's necessary. He did absolutely what was necessary that every fucking person who watched the documentary should either say, I've done that before, or damn, I wish I could have done that shit.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I agree.
I just want to say this quick though. Real quick though. Damn it, Eric Bischoff, you my man now.
Yeah.
You my man now.
Eric Bischoff's rise from the ranks to being basically doesn't have any idea what the wrestling business is, sitting in and learning television production. Eric is a smart, savvy businessman. There is no doubt about it. And his story should be told over and over again. I've read all of his books. I watched majority of his shows and listened to his shows. He is a smart businessman. And what he did with WCW will never be forgotten because Eric took a small, dingy lit WCW and took them mainstream, got them on the Tonight Show. He was Rodman, Leno, all that stuff. I mean, it's on and on. What Eric did do as well, which I think is highlighted here, is Eric took a lot of risks that a lot of performers, a lot of promoters wouldn't take. He handed out a lot of money, which we're seeing with some other companies right now as well. He handed out a lot of money and hoped for residuals. I'll go to Juice, WCW and Eric Bischoff. The businessman in Eric Bischoff, there's no question. Eric is one of the best, if not the best, to ever do it in the wrestling business. But do you think Eric Bischoff has a lot to do with the fall and who killed WCW?
You know, Ellis made a lot of great points in the business aspect of it, and I'll try to mention a couple of points throughout the documentary that I feel are the keys here. Eric, like you said, didn't really have an inkling about any of this stuff, but got in the business, worked his way up. And then he even said it. I threw my hat into the ring to see what would happen. And he got it, and he started making changes. One of the first changes that I recall, and that they mentioned, of course, they took the tapings to Disney, the soundstage, a new audience every couple hours. You could rattle off a bunch of tapings. He cut out house shows that were literally just hemorrhaging money. No one was there. No one was going there. They couldn't get great buildings. They'd run the same buildings all the time. And they changed it to the Disney MGM tapings. And sure, those fans might not be your traditional wrestling fans, but they were told what to do. It was a TV show. Clap here, boo this guy. It's smart business. It's a TV show, and that's how TV shows are run. I will also say this. He mentioned, and you said, will he be perceived in a positive light or what have you? Or Eric literally says, would I take back what I did, like with Starcade 97, whatever happened there, would I take back, like he said, that would haunt me for the rest of my life. And at the same time, he's saying, would I do all of this again? In a heartbeat, because he knew what he was doing. And the last point I'll make here, 1995, we're all old enough. Everybody says how trash of a year that was. And you know who made a profit for the first time? WCW. And
because of
Eric Bischoff, who he signed, Hulk Hogan. So we'll get to that too. But for as much crap as Eric Bischoff gets, and we don't have to touch on his, what he thinks about AEW, WWE right now, but I think he has a right to say whatever is on his mind because he's earned it. So, and we're not here without him.
No, and listen, Eric is allowed. He's the one of maybe like 5 or 6 voices that you should actually like listen to and absorb and take notes from in regards to what goes on in the wrestling business today. Now, Eric,
I liken him to Paul Heyman too. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're
same with Heyman.
100% right. Heyman, ECW, and the creative mind and the business mind. Heyman continues to always survive no matter where he's at or what he's doing, and he thrives at it. Eric is very much the same. I think at this point, Eric knows what sells, and Eric knows what buttons to push and how to push them. He's always known that, but especially now since he's not fully in the wrestling business or immersed in the wrestling business, Eric knows how to capture an audience. Controversy creates cash. And Eric is very good at that. Eric has always been very good at it.
Quick note. I have a copy of Controversy Creates Cash signed by Garrett Bischoff.
Oh, Garrett Bischoff. And listen, Eric and Garrett, more so Eric, are super friendly and always been nice. Eric consistently will talk to fans and everybody else and give them advice or whatever else. He is not the type of guy who doesn't welcome that type of stuff. Eric is a gem of a human being. He's just very opinionated and good for him. Corey, Eric Bischoff, your thoughts on not only him as the businessman, but we saw Eric as a character as well, which we'll get into. But what were your thoughts on Eric Bischoff as we started to see him as an announcer and then some of the things that he did? Do you think that Eric has a lot to do with the fall of Who Killed WCW?
Well, it's interesting with Eric because I do feel that he was neat. The background of how he got into WCW and what he did for them, that was needed on that first episode, because you get so much hearsay on how a lot of people do blame him for why WCW went down the tubes, and he doesn't get painted in that aspect of, well, he was X, Y, and Z in WCW. So I am glad that they covered that. And I remember Eric Bischoff coming on the shows, when it first happened, and little things I would see, even at my younger age, that you would see the ending credits of these pay-per-views and you're seeing Eric Bischoff's name, and I'm looking like, oh, I thought he was just the announcer. So it always made you pay attention more. That, granted, you didn't know what really was going on until you were much older, but he was somebody important, that his name was in the credits. So then when you started seeing more and more, and they touched on, when Hall and Nash came in and how he had to ask, I guess because it was getting to the point of legal, that he had to ask, hey, on air, do you guys work for WWF? And that him getting powerbombed through the stage in Baltimore. And you started to see that it was taking on that aspect of how Vince McMahon was starting to be viewed over in WWF.
We're gonna get to that.
Yeah, because people didn't know. People, as a kid, I thought he was just an announcer.
Yeah, and everybody
exactly. The steroid trial comes up, then you find out he's the owner.
Yeah. And Corey, you're 100% right. I mean, that's basically what changed everything. And you bring up the steroid trial. I think that's a good segue. Well, I'll take it. Hulk Hogan's involvement in WCW. Now, Hogan was off. He left professional wrestling in 1993, I believe it was, WrestleMania 9, and then he did the tour overseas, and then he was gone. Hulkamania was
did
done.
King of the Ring, and then
did King of the Ring in Dayton against Yogi.
Yeah. And then Vince made the decision that the red and yellow and Hulkamania was done. It had ran its course and everything else. And we see in this documentary that Eric, who had done a lot of changes, made a lot of changes to WCW, like Juice mentioned, took them out of the small, dingy little arenas that weren't selling worth half a you-know-what, and he put them into sound stages at Disney and everything else like that. Let's talk about this. Eric knew that Hulk Hogan was available. He was shooting a movie, but had no way of getting in contact with him. Eric talked to Ric Flair. Rick put Hulk Hogan and Eric into contact with each other. The significance of this signing, after all said and done, is monumental. We all know that. It took WCW from nothing to mainstream, in my opinion. Now, they had Ric Flair and they had Sting. I'm not discrediting any of those performers because Lord knows they're some of the best in the world. But you need marketability, and Hulk Hogan, I mean, you want to put an exclamation point on visibility and marketability. Hulk Hogan's your guy. Ellis, Hulk Hogan signing to WCW, obviously the biggest signing for that company. What did this do in 1994 into 1995 that showed that WCW was a player in the professional wrestling game?
So we talked about Bret Hart a moment ago and talked about mismanagement, right? When it comes to Hogan, it was potentially the best management of signing. They got the reality of life. They got their return on investment with the announcement of Hulk Hogan. A lot of things. So there's a thing called impressions, right? We think we know about it because we have Twitter and we can see the impression number, right? But so there's some math that's typically valuable. Cost per 1,000 impressions, which is what a lot of people look at when it comes to billboards and placement, right? The lower the cost, the more impressions. Now that's an efficient spend, right? Now we're looking at media value, right? So how many people, how much coverage, how much earned coverage can you get from that? And then on top of that, the value of that additional coverage. So we're looking at millions of dollars.
They threw a parade just for him signing.
I know, right? So if you just think about it, alone, forget the 4 pay-per-views or whatever. They had enough. They had more than whatever they paid Hogan back, probably even 4 times. with just that announcement alone in media value. And
Juice.
then, go ahead.
No, Juice, and I want you to continue, Ellis. Juice, the WCW announcement of Hogan, was that aired on Saturday nights, correct?
First of all, the parade was a work. Second of all, it was a work.
It was.
Yeah.
But they still threw a parade, though.
Of course. It was the biggest thing that WCW ever did.
Listen, somebody wants to throw a parade down my street. I mean, would it work or not? Okay, right.
And that parade was at Disney, right?
I want to get back. Yeah, I want to get back to. I want to get back to Ellis. That parade was on. That aired on WCW Saturday Night, correct?
Yeah, all that stuff was Saturday night, and they had led up. I think Spring Stampede '94 was like the last show where they didn't even mention Hogan. By Slamboree in May, they had like his name was brought up, and then that following month he had been like signed. They did the parade, and that's where the unification. Right? Well, June was a Clash of the Champions, Flair, Sting, and it was a unification to where the winner faces Hogan. Like they saw it in the distance, they planned ahead.
Okay, so Ellis, going back to what you said, the residuals in today, you were talking about impressions and everything else like that. Hulk Hogan going over, we didn't have social media. They aired the parade on Saturday night. I mean, we could look up the viewership numbers. I don't even know if they exist. I'm sure they do somewhere. I'm sure that, marketability, the marketing campaign that they did with that, it's invaluable because he was probably on every news station across the country.
And that's what I'm talking about, is the earned media value. That alone, again, we're talking about TV. We're not talking about the newspapers. We're not talking about Entertainment Tonight. We're not talking about every other news station that displayed what was going on. They generated enough awareness around WCW with that. And it's, again, right now, people would die for that.
Yeah,
people right now, it's their jobs to get that kind of media, and that announcement, again, millions, whatever they paid them, 4 times at least.
So to put this in today's terms and today's landscape for the boys and girls who have no idea, if we had to make a correlation or a similarity, Hulk Hogan going over to WCW, in my opinion, is like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and his popularity going to another wrestling company not named the WWE. Okay. That's the visibility. And I don't even know back then if it even is, comparable, but basically how we had to digest television and everything else like that was it was on a channel at a certain time. There was no recording unless you had a VCR. And even then some of that technology wasn't even out. And the way you consumed media was through your television, the news, or whatever else. So Hulk Hogan and WCW, even being mentioned in the same breath, but now being linked to be business partners, was all over the media. Mm-hmm. All over the media. So WCW had cemented themselves as a player. And then they have the Bash at the Beach match. And then we get WCW Monday Nitro, which I'm going to lead into next, which I think changed the game. But Juice, Corey, whoever wants to go first, I'll let you volley. Hulk Hogan, WCW, the biggest signing ever. That goes without question. But Hulk Hogan came with a lot of baggage in terms of a contract and what he wanted and what he didn't. Ellis said it was worth it. I agree to a certain extent. But Juice, how Hulk Hogan was presented in that first, year.
Yeah.
Do you think he was presented the way he should have been?
In a quick sense, yes. But I think by the tail end, and of course it turned into the NWO, the first couple of big matches that Hogan had were against Flair. They were matches that should have happened 2 years prior at WrestleMania 8 that WWE never capitalized on. So that was huge to start. Once we got into 95, he had great matches with Vader at 3 separate pay-per-views, and I thought those were all solid. But of course, by the end of the year, you start getting into the Dungeon of Doom. Oh, and by the way, Starcade 94 was Hogan and the Butcher, aka Brutus Beefcake. So just ignore the whole thing. But the Flair matches were great. He has the matches with Vader. By the end of the year, we got the sumo truck, the monster truck thing. Yeah. It starts falling apart, and then by early 96, it's funny enough, Uncensored 96 is Hogan and Savage versus all 8 of those guys, dubbed the Alliance to End Hulkamania. And damn it, they ended Hulkamania because the next time we saw him, he was the third man. So by the end of it, they kind of figured it out because they were getting booze. Kevin Sullivan mentioned it on the doc. They were getting booze. They even showed him being the old lady throwing the powder in his face and shaving his mustache. Great stuff. Hokey stuff, but fun. But by the end, they figured it out. NWO.
Yeah, they sure did with the NWO, which we'll get to. Corey, I want to talk to you about same Hulk Hogan vein, but listen, they get Hulk Hogan. They immediately put him in a program with Ric Flair, which I think is brilliant because that's a match that WWF never did, which they should have. Eric Bischoff has gone out and changed a lot of things that WCW has going for them. He changes the way they're produced. He changes the way they're shot. He goes and gets a big star. And now he's always had Ted Turner's backing, but now it's even more, I would assume, because he just landed Hulk Hogan. Talk about the significance of Hulk Hogan and what that did, not only for WCW, but for, in my opinion, and I want yours, the feeling from the board that was Turner at that point. Like that had to change the game for them in terms of how they viewed professional wrestling, because it is wildly said on here that Turner really didn't want anything to do with professional wrestling. It was all Ted.
So let's look at the first 365 days or so that Hogan's there. I'll go Bash at the Beach 94 to 95. Just the involvement alone, you had Shaq at Bash at the Beach 94. You had Mr. T over at Halloween Havoc. You had they did an entire Baywatch based on Bash at the Beach 95. So that the return on investment for Hulk Hogan, like Ellis was mentioning, that Juice mentioned, and you mentioned, Drew, it was there already within that first year. After Bash at the Beach, which is ironically, I think the pay-per-view before that was, or after, was Great American Bash, where Giant debuted, and then they started doing the Dungeon of Doom stuff. Juice is right. That's when it started to taper off for Hulkamania, because that first year, like I said, if you go Bash at the Beach to Bash at the Beach with Hogan from 94 to 95, you couldn't have asked for a better. He was worth every dollar at that point.
And I'll add to that. Dennis Rodman came out at Bash at the Beach 95. Muhammad Ali was at Bash at the Beach 94. And you said Great American Bash, I believe, took place before Bash at the Beach.
Before, yes.
So you knew of the Giant because he was just like front row, but he wasn't integrated until later on in the year.
And you guys don't have a run sheet because I didn't send you guys one. This is all organic. And I like how you tied that into that. Hulk Hogan brought over mainstream superstars and names, in my opinion, when you saw Muhammad Ali, Dennis Rodman. We later on
O'Neal in Orlando.
Shaquille O'Neal. We later on saw different stars, celebrities pop in, but you have to understand that the cross promotional material and the cross platforms that we see now, back then, when you're able to tie in an NBA superstar who's setting the world on fire, when you can tie in the greatest boxer of all time before Mike Tyson, and even some still think that Muhammad Ali, and rightfully so, was better than Tyson in their primes. I mean, you can't pay for that type of stuff. So Hulk Hogan changed the game for WCW. I want to talk about the executives and their feeling towards WCW before and after Hulk Hogan. Ellis, they talked about it. They had a lot of different executives. Well, I would say two on this one from what I remember, the first episode, but there are a lot of executives that are going to come in and out of this mini-series. Their viewing of professional wrestling was Southern wrestling, and they hated it. They wanted it off the network. They couldn't stand it, but Ted loved it. Now you get Hulk Hogan and all this possible visibility, which we see turn into real visibility and eyes on their product. You think the corporate heads changed their tune once Hulk Hogan donned the red and yellow and jumped on the WCW landscape there?
I don't think they changed their tune. I think they accepted what was happening. You can't deny when you look at reports talking about media coverage, you can't deny changes in revenue. You can't deny changes in viewership, right? So everyone knows that in every workplace there's politics, and they had their focus. They wanted to get rid of this thing. They're not going to put too much effort or bandwidth towards it. But again, you can't deny it. So I think as we continue on with this story, I think we're going to see that play out. We're going to see that workplace politics play out and show, hey, even though you were doing all this, we kind of still didn't want to.
I agree. Matt says you don't you do a Hogan's contract basically 100 times out of 100, even with foresight. And I would tend to agree because there's a lot of things that Hulk brought to WCW that are invaluable. And the one thing that, which we'll talk about as these episodes go on, that I think was detrimental to WCW was his creative control, which he started to exercise late in his career because I think he started to see the writing on the wall and some other people getting over, and everybody cares about their spot, brother. But we'll talk about that towards the other parts of the episode. Once we get other people who were there, we're not going to pretend like we're there. We're also not going to pretend like we're experts. We're going to let the documentary do all of the speaking, and then we will give our thoughts on it because we're opinionists. So, well, I know I am. I think some others might think that they're, not, but I'm an opinionist. So we'll start and end with opinions there. Hulk Hogan and WCW. They get Terry Bollea to come in, signs a massive contract, a lot of things that go into it, pay-per-view, 4 of them. He gets merchandise. He gets this appearance fee, that appearance fee, et cetera, et cetera. We now get to the point of the documentary, the 4-part miniseries, where Eric Bischoff is brought into a meeting with Ted Turner, and Ted tells him or asks him, how can I compete with Vince? And Eric had no idea this was coming, didn't know what to say, and thought to himself from what we saw, well, they have prime time. You want to compete? I need prime time. And Ted Turner, having the grapefruits that he had and has, said, all right. I think he believed that he looked at Scott Sassa and said, Scott, give Eric 2 hours prime time on TNT, Monday Night Nitro. And from what we discovered from this miniseries was that they already had that Nitro logo and trademark and everything already done for previous properties that they just took over and made it WCW Monday Nitro, which was smart, brilliant, cost-cutting, effective, all that type of stuff. But let's talk about the significance of this. This really kicked off the wars, and Eric took a very, very logical and, in my opinion, a strategical venue choice here for WCW because he knew he couldn't sell out arenas even with Hulk Hogan because their visibility and everything else was not, their popularity was not at where it needed to be. And you only have one chance to make a first impression, so don't make it a bad one. But let's talk about WCW Monday Night Nitro. I haven't started with Corey, so I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to go to Juice, then I'll go to Ellis. Monday Night Nitro.
Monday Nitro, Drew. Just Monday Nitro.
Monday
That's
Nitro.
the point. It flows. It's not Monday Night Nitro.
I like Monday Night Nitro, but all right, we'll go Monday Nitro.
Oh,
whatever
my
it is.
God. What are you? Come on.
Corey, the significance of the 2 hours on TNT every Monday goes, without saying. But what did this do for WCW besides put more eyeballs on the product? But what did this really do for WCW in your opinion?
Basically, the only optic you had of WCW at that time, and I'm sure Juice will agree, the only optic you have of it was worldwide, pro, main event, Saturday night, and at max you have about 800 people, and that's probably at Saturday night. At that point, you put it in Mall of America, where you're going to have a constant flow of people just because it's the mall. The optic of what you saw WCW as totally changed. Like you mentioned earlier, you go from these dim backgrounds of fans where you don't have anybody seated in those seats to 80 million lights on. You see everything in the mall. You see people going up the escalator. You see people coming out of the stores.
Oh, it was jam-packed.
People stopping with their bags and watching the show. That's something that you couldn't ask for a better script of your first show coming out of that, from the optic of what it presents as on television.
It was so strategically, so
Mhm.
strategically well done because, I mean, you don't even have to like wrestling. You're going to get a pair of shoes or a jacket. And you're like, what the hell is going on out there? And then you stop for 15 to 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. And they get you on the camera shot and it always looks full instead of putting it in a 10,000 seat arena where you could only sell 3,000 tickets and you got a tarp and you got a light and you got to do all this other stuff. It was such a strategic choice. Juice. WCW Monday Night Nitro obviously changed the game for WCW.
Monday Nitro. We're going to train you into that. I promise.
WCW Monday Nitro.
You should know better. It literally flows. It's the genius of the name.
I like Monday Night. But WCW Nitro really changed the game for WCW in terms of the competition with WWF and everything else like that. We saw Lex Luger debut. The venue choice was smart. Eric has always had a very, very good eye and a vision. But the 2 hours on TNT every Monday, I mean, what does that do for WCW in your opinion?
So you said Ted had grapefruits. I just look at it like he had such a love for WCW, and that was seemingly some of the problem by the end. Was he was like the only guy that really, really cared about wrestling. Everybody else was like, "What the hell is this? We have CNN, we have all these things and movies and Cartoon Network. Why are we putting wrestling here?" Ted Turner saw that there was, money there, and he liked wrestling, and he put forth. He gave Eric Bischoff the ropes, the reins, as it were. And Corey, I'm glad you mentioned pro main event worldwide. These like outside of Saturday night 605 on the mothership. There's so many like random little programs that was all you had. You never had anything on Monday. All you had was Monday Night Raw for practically 2.5 years. And outside of grabbing some spaghetti at Pasta Mania, the Mall of America in the 90s was the perfect storm of the height of malls. And what do you do on Friday night? What do you do on Saturday? The Mall of America is the pinnacle of that.
Good times.
That it's still a destination, I would say now, but it's almost more of a nostalgia thing, because back then it was at the height of malls and at the height of popularity. Yeah. So to have a show, I think it was just Luger debuting, you get a Hogan match, you get Flair versus Sting, and then you get a rematch from Super Brawl 2 with Pillman and Liger. Yep. Like the amount of stuff you can compile in one first show, like you said, Drew, your first impression, you get one chance. And I think, again, perfect storm. I think it was a perfect spot to have it. And we're all talking about it. Like, people kind of think it might be hokey looking at it, like wrestling at a mall. But looking back, I think it was pretty damn genius.
The nostalgia that you just gave me when you were talking about Friday nights and Saturday nights as a kid, a teenager, going to the mall, shout out Roosevelt Field. I mean, now it's a ghost town, Roosevelt Field on Long Island, New York. But I mean, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
Actually, and Eric, you guys, Drew, I'm going to say this too for you guys. Look back at that Nitro. I implore everybody watching, go back and watch that first Nitro. Just as a kid, when I see the Great Train Store, service merchandise, I'm looking at these, I'm like, oh my gosh, my childhood is literally right in front of me. You want a nostalgic trip just to look at the stores in the background of that mall? Go watch that Monday Nitro for sure.
But I think that's the genius of Eric Bischoff. That really that's not talked about here is that Eric was watching trends before you could actually like watch trends on a computer or anything else like that. And he saw that where is the most foot traffic that I could get without people actually having to pay for a ticket? Malls and the Mall of America. I mean, the Mall of America had so much hype and publicity at that time. Still to this day, I mean, listen, I'm here in Minnesota. A lot of people still go to the mall. You won't catch me there because it's just, I mean, you could do everything online. I mean, it's the nostalgia value is there at times.
I heard Eric was a Minnesota guy. Don't forget that. Who was a Minnesota guy? Eric Bischoff.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what, but that was the connection I always made years later. That he probably had an in to get Mall of America. That was even genius.
Well, I mean, you don't think Eric goes back to his roots? I mean, him and Vern Gagne, he probably was like the first WCW show that we could launch. I want to be in Minnesota. I mean, I'm just saying.
I hear the rumors of the Raw after the 2-night SummerSlam are going to be taking place at the Mall of America. So get your tickets now.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I can promise you that. That's not going to happen. Not a chance. You know what? There's a local promotion here in Minnesota that ran Mall of America.
They did. Didn't RVD, wasn't he on that show?
Yeah, somebody was just there. Yeah.
Saturday Night Nitro. It was fantastic. Amazing. It was fantastic. Ellis, Eric Bischoff's vision for the Mall of America and the first Nitro. And what does Nitro mean to WCW? Because Nitro did not kill WCW. But what does this mean for them? How significant was this for them? And how significant was that venue choice?
Before I answer that question, you guys have said the same one word over and over again. Genius. This man knew his business. He was in the boardroom with the head of the company. He asked a question. He said it felt like 20 minutes, but it was actually seconds. Who? Again, not a lot of people would actually be able to answer a question like that and have it make sense, and have the person they're talking to say, you know what, let's freaking do it. People can say all they want, this is obvious, of course. Bullshit.
Right.
You know, not a lot of people know their business in that manner. Fucking genius. The venue, we're talking about the end about the venue. That shit doesn't come out fucking like that. You know what you're looking for. You have a vision. You have a difference. That is different thinking than the entrepreneur.
Well, I'm sure
outside
Eric,
the box.
Yeah, I'm sure Eric talked to Ted, and Ted talked to somebody who knew somebody at the Mall of America, and Eric was so smart with that. If you listen, which his wife is on this documentary, Lori talks about it. If Eric believes in something, he is in it 110%. And Eric believed in WCW. Go ahead.
You're 100% correct. Again, I'm just calling out the fact that people have to understand what being about your business is. You're seeing the documentary started off the way you did on purpose. You don't get to where he got to by bullshitting, by saying, "Oh, I understand," or "I know my reasons." That this man was about business. Again, to come up with that answer fast, to be able to pick the venue, to be able to strategize Lex Luger, all the other things. This man wasn't thinking wrestling. I don't think any wrestling promoter. I'm about to be an asshole. I don't think any wrestling promoter, outside of a very small few percentage of people, would think in that manner or be able to answer that question so fucking well.
I think you're right. I mean, Eric said on the show he had no idea that question was coming and didn't know what to do, and quickly came up with an answer that he thought was going to be shot down, and it wasn't. And then when it wasn't, Eric went back to his office, he said, and really thought about what he was going to do. I don't know right then and there if Eric selected the Mall of America. I think Eric probably sat back and was strategic about it, which he is, but Eric is a doer. There's a lot of sayers in the world. Eric is a doer, and you saw it throughout this documentary, and you continue to see it. Eric knows how to keep his name relevant, and if Eric Bischoff believes in something and sees a vision in something, he does it. You could see it. Monday Night Nitro, off to the races, Mall of America. We are Monday Nitro. Okay, I like to call it Monday Night Nitro. Get over it. I'm going to do it 101,000 times, so get over it. Monday Nitro is off to the races here with WCW. We saw it at the Mall of America. They start getting into different little venues here and there. But what they did do is they went back to Disney, and they went back to, was it MGM Studios? Is that where they're at?
Well, it was, yep.
Yeah. And now we saw this episode of WCW Nitro.
Mm-hmm.
You three happy? WCW Nitro, where the NWO is, after Bash at the Beach, the NWO is kind of formulated here, and we see the true, I would say, genesis of what was to come with the NWO. We saw something that was very significant, in which they talked about the way that they started to use different camera cuts and angles and everything else like that. We saw one still shot, I believe, that took Jimmy Hart screaming during a match. Then they went backstage, and then you saw baseball bats with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. I got to go back. I missed a step here, and I apologize. WCW signs Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. Let's talk about that first, okay? Because I just jumped into Bash at the Beach without talking about that. That's my mistake. We do need to talk about it.
It's only the biggest pay-per-view in the history of professional wrestling. Who cares about that?
Well, no, I mean, but we need to talk about the significance of signing Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, because a lot of people think that Scott Hall and Kevin Nash killed WCW. I don't believe so. And I'll give you my reasons why as we progress this episode. But WCW now has all the mainstream popularity, and they have everything else going for them with the signing of Hogan, the Mall of America, Nitro's off to the races. Now we get Scott Hall and Kevin Nash's contract coming up with WWF, and Vince McMahon can't afford them. Eric Bischoff, again, grapefruits, takes his balls, throws them against the wall, and says, I'm going to offer you guys a lot of money, less dates, guaranteed contracts with a favored nations clause. All right, done deal. Kevin Nash and Scott Hall come over from WWF, and they were major stars over in WWF. Main eventing. One was a former WWF champion. The other held the Intercontinental Championship and was in major programs with Vince McMahon and his company. They kept them kind of the same characters for the most part without calling them Diesel and Razor, realistically. Scott Hall shows up and looks exactly like he does in WWF as Razor Ramon. But let's talk about the significance of the signings. How big were these two signings back-to-back to WCW's growth? The show's about who killed WCW. I can tell you right now, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash did not kill WCW. Juice, I'll start with you. How significant was this signing?
The two signings were huge. I mean, I think we all kind of know that. It's almost rhetorical at this point, but I believe you've said it on some other videos, some other shows. You're not really sure, and I'm not really sure that anything like this to the extent and levity could happen now. The amount of talent that those two guys in particular had in 94 to 95, to where by 96 Kevin Nash just was in the Undertaker match at WrestleMania. Razor Ramon had just been in one of the biggest matches at WrestleMania 10, like a couple years before that. Like
they're all in major matches at the Garden.
Yes, they're all at the height there, and the best part is that they both were in WCW before, so they could kind of utilize certain things to kind of play off that, and with the legal troubles, of course, that they do you work for the WWF? No.
Right.
And the last little point, I did bring this as well. This, if you have a VCR that Drew mentioned, this tape is from the June 10th, 1996 Nitro, Wheeling Civic Center. I was there as a 3-year-old, and that was the Kevin Nash. Yeah. That's Kevin Nash's re-debut as, look at the adjective, play.
Yeah. I remember that.
Put that in the doc.
Yeah, I'm here. Where is he? And then
that's right. He's right behind him. So I was there. I don't really recall it, but during Jim Duggan's entrance, my dad is holding me up, and you can see me for a brief moment. So that's
there you go.
I've always been WCW since.
So go back. Well, that's why you're here. I mean, you are the WCW historian. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash coming over again. Major programs with World Wrestling Federation at the time, now known as Wrestling Entertainment, and they really blurred the lines, which was something we had really never seen before. And this was significant. Are they working for Vince? Are they working for the WWF? Like, Eric was so smart to weave that into his storylines. It's another genius of Eric Bischoff. Now, I do think we're going to start to see the fall of Eric Bischoff and maybe the drunk, power, stuff like that. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. I'm not talking about alcohol. Eric was drunk with power from a lot of people's perspective. We'll have to wait and see if that's what they talk about. But Eric was very smart, wove this into the storylines. Are Nash and Hall with us? Or are they with them? The significance of Hall and Nash coming over to WCW, in my opinion, is very much, I think it's underplayed, truthfully. I think it's undervalued. Hulk Hogan coming over was huge, but without Hall and Nash, this stuff, WCW never rises to the heights that we saw it. That's just me telling you.
So one thing that I want to point out too, that to add what you guys have been saying, in 96, when Hall and Nash were on their way out, yeah, they may have lost a match here or there, but they were still on the main programming. But they were never, as we see with a lot of people when they're on their way out, they lose a ton of matches, or they're going, even when Dean Ambrose was leaving WWE in 2019, he was doing a lot of stuff where they were, having him lose. So you didn't see that with Hall and Nash. All of a sudden, you saw them from WWF literally on WCW programming. The Scott Hall one especially, because it was like, we just saw him a couple of weeks ago on Raw or so, and then boom, he was on. And then the follow-up, they couldn't have asked for a better situation. It wasn't 2 and 3 months down the line that Kevin Nash all of a sudden was available. He was available within weeks.
Corey, that's why they started releasing people from their contracts, because then they get the 90 days, non-competes. When you let that contract expire and you don't re-sign somebody, not resign, re-sign, spelling is key. But when you fail to re-sign somebody, you saw it with Adam Copeland. He was able to pop up because they just didn't re-sign him. They didn't release Copeland, and he was able to pop over to AEW, et cetera, et cetera. That's why they started releasing bigger talents, because they could basically sit them on their ass for 90 days and lose a lot of the momentum. This was not the case with Hall and Nash. It was not the case. They came over with a ton of momentum and then blended it into something which we're going to get to. Ellis, you think I'm out of pocket by saying that Hall and Nash are the biggest signings that WCW had? I mean, don't get me wrong, Hogan with the visibility and the marketability, but I think Hall and Nash changed the game.
1,000% out of pocket. I don't want to be an ass here. Actually, I do want to be an ass, but I'm telling you, if Kevin Nash, Scott Hall came over, and Hulk Hogan was not there beforehand, we would be telling a very, very different story right now.
Oh, I agree with you, but I'm saying
So and this story is being told in a manner of importance.
Sure.
Okay, it's not like it's being told in an order. Yeah. Eric Bischoff,
Ted Turner,
Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
The corporate structure.
Yeah.
Now, Nash and whatever are part of the element of different television. Sure. They're not the catalyst for the audience initial growth. Again, NWO wouldn't be NWO if it wasn't for Hogan. I don't want to go back to Hogan. I don't want to talk about brother all day long. But damn it, don't get it twisted. NWO was successful because of Hogan.
100%.
They got the audience they got because of Hogan.
100%.
Nash. Go ahead.
No, to a lesser extent, Lex Luger was a huge signing. They didn't know he was going to be available, and then they got him. And I know, polarizing to some, and he might not be the greatest in-ring worker, but damn, he had a huge moment on the 100th episode of Nitro with defeating Hogan, and he's got some decent moments. So I feel like, again, without of course, but without Hogan, I don't think you get some of these guys to jump because they weren't considered a legitimate company.
100% Juice, and 100%
Ellis.
Not
to discredit Hall and Nash, of course.
And Ellis is spot on. But what I'm saying to you, both Ellis and Juice, you get Hogan, and Lex comes before Hall and Nash does. So yes, Hogan brought a lot of people who were like, I want to go over there. We can make money with Hulk. I get it. All that. I get it. Trust me, I get it. And the visibility, brother. And the marketability, brother. But what I'm saying to all of you is if they get Hulk Hogan, great. They get Lex Luger, great. WCW in 1997 without Hall and Nash is what? We'll go 96. Lex, Sting, Flair, and Hogan.
And Savage.
Yeah, and Savage for sure.
And we haven't even talking about Randy Savage, which came in 94.
I'm just saying, I don't think they rise to the heights that they rose without Hall and Nash.
And I challenge you on this too. Just the same way that, again, and now we had a more transparent conversation on the documentary where Bischoff was saying it was on Hogan. I was talking to Sting. I was talking to Sting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And then Hogan said, "It's me."
No, he's
Hogan being the third man. Change. So even if Hall and Nash didn't come, he had the foresight of change. The change was necessary, and whatever change was going to happen, it was going to help the business. I get it. Kevin Nash is how tall. You love the tall guys. You love to hug them. But I'm just letting you know that guess what? No, it's not them. It's still Hogan, brother.
Well,
each of ours.
Kevin's mind for the business really is underrated, but I will get to that later. What I will say to you is that, which I was surprised, and to you too, Juice, because you two talked about this, and Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, and Juice, you as well, because I know you're the historians, but Bischoff had talked to Hogan, which they did not talk about in this documentary earlier, and Hogan said, "I'll never turn heel, brother, until you walk a mile in my red and yellow boots." The way that they perceived this was that Bischoff got a phone call from Hogan, and Hogan was like, "Hey, I see what you're doing. I'm the third man." Eric had already tried to make this happen before.
Yeah. Well, we talked about Halloween Havoc 95, where Kevin Sullivan shaved off his mustache and Hogan's mustache, and Hogan came back with all black tights, black shirt. And this is October 95, so we're not even into 96 yet, and again, barely into Nitro. And they're kind of experimenting because, like Sullivan said, he could hear the boos. Hulkamania had been stale as he was leaving WWF.
That's a good point.
Taskmaster face paint too.
Yes, I think only a couple years in, it started to get stale again. They were, regardless if the NWO was the idea, it was just like something needs to change. But it was down to Hogan to say, "I'll do it," because otherwise he's going to lose out on all that money.
That's a really good point, Juice, that I think a lot of people don't put two and two together. That Hogan showing up with the sunglasses and the black Hulkster belt and everything in black, he was not a part of the NWO. That was in 95 before the 1996 Bash at the Beach happened. Hogan went back to the red and yellow. We saw it at Bash at the Beach, which was interesting. But, Corey, I said it, and I stand by it. I stand on my business. You can have Hogan, Lex, Rick, Sting, and Macho. And I have an immense amount of respect for all of them. But I don't think WCW gets to the heights it gets to without adding a Hall and Nash and putting all three of those men together.
Exactly right. I kind of agree. I do agree with that, because you're getting to the point where you have to bring in a new audience at this point, to where those people that were growing up on Hogan are either young adults or they're teenagers at this point. Like I said, 96, I was 12 years old. So I'm already well out of whatever Hogan was trying to do for me as a kid. At this point, I'm looking at Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, and Diesel. They were the cool guys over in WWF. So they come over here, they instantly have my attention. These are the people at this point that you're getting your next paycheck, not paycheck, you're getting your next dollars from in merchandise, in attendance, and things of this nature. Because like I said, these are the young adults, and these are the teenagers who are coming over, and they're watching WCW, but they're not really, Hogan's not their person anymore that he was in 88 and 89, where you're like, oh my goodness, Hogan. And I was never a Hogan fan, but I get it. And now you're looking at who's the new blood, they had Sting, which even Sting at that point was already older, but they had Sting at least. And then bringing in Hall and bringing in Nash, like we mentioned earlier, when they didn't have, for lack of a better term, burial on WWF, they came in still just as fresh as they were that you saw them on TV a few weeks before that. It's a big deal.
You brought up age. Let's talk about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Hall and Nash jump over. They're 37 and 38 respectively.
Mm-hmm.
They might have been 37 and 36 at the time. I don't know when their birthdays are, but they were. Go ahead, Juice.
And sorry to interrupt, but
No,
WrestleMania 12, the show where those guys had their last big, moments, they had the billionaire Ted skits with the Huckster and Nacho Man making fun of the company that those two guys would help change and hurt WWF 4 months later.
Yeah.
But again, the biggest thing is Hogan comes over to WCW and he's already into his his early 40s to mid 40s. If I'm not, I could be mistaken there, but I'm almost positive he was 44, 45-ish. Hogan, Hall, and Nash together, game changers. But Hall and Nash jumping over in their 37 and 36 at the time, their ages, is so significant. A lot of people on social media are like, because Juice said this, you're never going to have a luxury that Eric Bischoff had where he has afforded Hogan, Hall, and Nash. AEW is not signing guys in their 30s that have the name value. So the comparison is ridiculous. Hall and Nash jumping over here in their late 30s is so significant because wrestlers really don't hit their prime peak in terms of main event status and everything else like that unless you're the few and far in betweens, the Lesnars, the Rocks, and the Randy Ortons, and maybe even a John Cena, into their like 35 to 40. So this is a massive signing, in my opinion, for WCW. The Hall and Nash signing is very underrated, in my opinion. Without them, they are nowhere near where they need to be in terms of heights. Just my opinion.
I think they supplement each other because we've been saying, and Hogan was there for almost 2.5 years before those guys came in. So Hogan had been established as a WCW talent now and had done this and done that. So I do think that those guys were incredibly important. It's just tough to say what is more important. I don't think it's very fair to make a comparison like that, considering Hogan was in 94 and it was a whole different type of signing. It was a guy who was the business, was out of the business, and now we can have him in our company and change everything. 2 years of that experiment. Now you need to maybe change things going forward, a different direction. And you got two guys who are willing to do it. And they've been in WCW before, but it's under new management, Eric Bischoff, who has a different vision, more money, whatever. And it seemed like maybe the grass was greener until they blew it all.
And it's not like WCW signed Bob Holly and Isaac Yankem at that point. These were major stars. I have a ton of respect for Bob, but I'm just saying these were major stars in the industry at that time, coming off major programs, and they were WWF through and through.
Yeah.
Let's just put this in perspective. I know this is who killed WCW, but I want to talk about who really made WCW because we're going to get to who killed WCW. Eric Bischoff made WCW, no doubt about that. Hulk Hogan made WCW, no doubt about that. But if you plug out Hall and Nash, and let's just say you do Savage and Luger, I don't know.
I think
Wow.
it has a limit to how good or great it could be. Hall and Nash, to your point, even 5 or 6 years younger than Hogan and Savage, gave them a little bit of an extra boost. They were, to Corey's point, the cool guys. They were like, it gave a little bit of a edge, razor's edge. Like, it gave a little bit of a distinction that maybe they're making fun of our guys being old, but these guys coming in seem to not care, and they were just in WWE, so maybe they're onto something. Maybe
And thank God Hogan agreed to it, because if Sting does this and Hogan doesn't, we're talking about a completely different company.
It's one hell of a butterfly effect, I tell you.
Yeah.
Completely different company.
And it's funny, you all brought this up. The Hall and Nash and the Hogan signings are significant as big signings for two different reasons, in my opinion. Hogan brings, because he was older when he signed, but Hogan brings the business, the marketing, the Hollywood, no pun intended, but pun intended. He brings Hollywood with him. We ran down all of the stars earlier that he brought in because he signs with WCW. The signings of Hall and Nash, to me, and I know it's loose, but hear me out, he brings the fans. Those two bring the fans over. Hall and Nash bring in you have that teetering line of the four of us who are in that age group of, we like wrestling, we're watching it, but we're at that age where it could be swayed into us not watching it anymore. So now you're at the point that, okay, we've got to bring in this new crop of fans, because what we have left could possibly grow out of it. So who do we bring over? You bring over Hall, you bring over Nash, you bring this reality that, unless it's been done, it was never done at a higher profile, of reality base that they're jumping from one company to another. And it's never, they blurred that line, like you all said, so well, that Eric never said that they didn't work. He took that approach. I never said they didn't work for WWF, but I'm not going to say that they are. So,
right.
And Corey, I want to piggyback off that with what I mentioned with Mania 12 with the Huckster thing.
Yep.
What were they also promoting at the same time as they were airing those? The new WWF generation.
Yep.
Who was at the forefront of that? Who was at the forefront of that? Razor Ramon and Big Daddy Cool Diesel, the guy who held the title all throughout 95. So to Corey's point, it was like even 5 years younger of an audience. That's so many more people that get to go over. You add the Hogan and the Savage. That's your lineage 80s guys. You bring the hot stars of the 90s.
Yep.
You got something.
The biggest thing for me, though, which we'll get into, we got to get into the NWO and how much of an impact that had on the professional wrestling industry, not only for WCW, but we saw ripple effects across the board, WWE, et cetera, et cetera. The NWO happens in 1996 at Bash at the Beach. That's where everything kind of comes to a head. And then all of a sudden we're off to the races. And we have that Monday Nitro that we were talking about, that I interrupted and went back to the Hall and Nash signing, because that's just the way things happened. We have this Nitro, and we have the still shot and everything else of Hall and Nash and Hogan. They had baseball bats. They took Mysterio and lawn darted him against a trailer. And Nash talks about how Mysterio says, "Hey, can you throw me through the window?" "No, dude, you'll die." Just the thoughts, like what they were willing to do to get this product and this company over. Hall and Nash, not only were they major superstars, but they were dudes you wanted to hang out with, in my opinion. Like, they were somebody that you wanted to go sit and have a conversation with. They were cool. This whole NWO thing, realistically, the way that they shot it, the way that they were presented, they weren't presented as like bad guys. They were presented as cool badasses. That's why it worked. What did you guys think of how we initially saw the NWO?
Let me ask you all this, because I don't remember them saying it, but we've heard it countless times on other documentaries of WCW. Did they mention on this one, when they did the thing at Disney MGM, that they had this people that were, living in the surrounding neighborhoods or whatnot, calling the police because they thought, did they mention that on the show?
They did not, but I'm glad you brought that up, because that's as we talk about this outside of ECW, this was like the first reality-based thing I recall in wrestling.
Exactly.
To this extent.
Exactly. And that was the thing that kind of really triggered when you heard that later, just the allure of what this storyline was bringing, that they cut it, and the mixture of the faces and the heels. You saw Arn Anderson back there, Flair, Mysterio, I think Scotty Riggs, and some of the other lower tier WC. Everybody was together checking on everybody else that just got assaulted.
Yeah,
so it was like,
I mean, they were call the ambulance, call the police, call this other stuff. The
Yep.
way they shot it again was very, very smart. And our friend of the program and somebody who's going to be doing more than a couple shows with me and some others here on Final Bell, Blake Mitchmore, says you're missing the biggest factor with Hall and Nash. Their name value wasn't important. Their swag and cool factor made the NWO. Blake, I can't agree with you anymore. I just said that, and I agree with you 110%. The coolness of both men really transferred over to the NWO. And another thing that we really didn't get to see yet on Who Killed WCW was how they basically, Hall and Nash, which is why I think them and their signing is almost invaluable. They coached Hulk on the promos that needed to be done. Hulk still came in with the brother, and Hall and Nash were like, no, we can't do it that way. Their brains, in my opinion, were far ahead of anything else that they did in the wrestling ring. But Ellis, the way that they shot this, the production value, everything for WCW went up. What did you think of the way they shot the NWO?
Again, it's really again going back to the genius of Bischoff, but I'm also going to say it was also the team, the management, whoever else was back there. They said during the show this was the first time they turned to production to film something. They didn't really ask about shots to production before, and production was all bought in. They went ahead and they emulated what cop show was that?
Hill Street Blues.
Oh, Hill Street Blues, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean they were also bought in and making this different, and it was smart. And also on top of this too, I mean, you're looking at the time frame, 1996, right? What were the top shows on TV?
Probably Springer.
Actually, it was. I looked it up. It was. I was surprised.
Go ahead.
I was surprised. Yeah, it was actually not Jerry Springer. I thought it was, and then it totally.
Was that 97?
Yeah, it's a weird time, but syndication and normal TV was rated different, I guess.
Okay.
But ER, Seinfeld, whatever, right? But either way, Jerry
Friends.
Springer was still topping. Friends was number 4. Tied with the Naked Truth.
Naked Truth.
Jerry Springer, yeah. But Jerry Springer was still there, right? And we're looking at Crash TV. We're looking at all this stuff. It was how things were done. I was telling someone about the 90s, the late 90s the other day, because a 5-year difference between people is a really big deal. But I was like, you just had to be there. You just had to be there. If you talk about it right now, you'll probably get canceled about what we used to do or chant or watch or whatever. But
the music, the television, everything was ridiculous. I mean, you could never get away with 99.9% of the stuff you got away with. I would say
societal norms are totally different now.
97 to 2000, and I would say even 1 was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
But it's really called to how, again, Bischoff had his pulse, had his fingers on the pulse of what was going on. Because if TV wasn't going that direction, he'll be following whatever was happening.
Yeah,
and it's just it's a callback to the fact that not only was he forward thinking, that he was able to get people to jump on board and say, hey, guess what? Hey, production person, what should we do? Because I wrestle, you make this look like Jerry Springer.
And I think that's a really good point about Bischoff. I think Bischoff saw something, wanted to execute something, but he let the Hogans, Hall, and Nashes kind of do what they needed to do, and he didn't really muddle. Whereas I would say a lot of other maybe later on. But if you ever go back and watch a Vince McMahon shot promo or anything else like that, Vince is there from beginning to end, shooting how he wants it to be shot, how he wants the cadence to be, everything else. I think Eric let the NWO be the NWO for the most part. That could be part of why WCW is no longer in business, but we'll get to that as the episodes progress. Go ahead, Ellis.
There's one thing I wanted to call out though, and it's like one of the clips that they were using to promote the show, where Kevin Nash said, "Do you want the story or do you want the actual? Like, do you want the BS story or do you want the actual story?"
Yeah,
and I think as we watch this stuff, I think we're getting, and it's like, I know we've heard other versions of what happened with Nitro. I think what we're getting here is a little. It might sound different, but this might be the best version of what we've heard, or more accurate version of what happened compared to the other.
Yeah,
documentary. I just want to call that out because
I think yeah, I think you're right. I think the gloves are off. I mentioned that at the beginning. I think this is the first documentary we are going to get that Eric isn't sitting behind the Raw stage, or we're not getting WWF revisionist history of what took place. I think you're going to get firsthand knowledge, which is key. The people they have for this, the talent they have for this, the executives they have for this are key. Yep. We saw this. Listen, the Vice guys and girls and the Dark Side of the Ring guys and girls and $7 production guys and girls are very smart. They hooked you within the first 7 minutes. What they said was very, very smart. They had Bret saying, "Go F yourself." Kevin Nash said, "Thanks for the money. You want the real truth or you want the garbage stuff?" You saw Goldberg talk about how it's insane how we went from this to out of business. You saw Russo defending himself. You saw Bischoff defending himself. Hogan's not on it, so be it. But basically what you got in the first episode, to put a bow on this, is you got all of the positives from WCW, and then they left you with a cliffhanger. They built this match for 18 months, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. 18 months, the Hogan and Sting match, right?
That's from July 96 to December 97, yes.
Which would never been done before on WCW television. The only person that would do that would be Vince McMahon, according to Eric Bischoff, because the rumor was that Vince knew his WrestleMania main event a year in advance, barring any injuries and all that other stuff. So Bischoff and co said, "Why can't we do this?" And what we saw happen was, again, the first 40 minutes of this show was all positives, besides the opening about some people telling you to go F yourself. And we're going to talk about the real things. You had executives telling you that it was the talent. You had DDP laughing. There was a ton of stuff that you were like, okay, this is going to be good. This was a positive first episode until the last 5 minutes, which we're going to talk about right here, right now. Starcade is how they left. Basically, Sting was supposed to get the world championship. It was supposed to be a fast count by Nick Patrick. The fast count never happened. The backstage bullshit and drama, Hulk Hogan invoking his creative control, saying, "This doesn't work for me. Tonight's not the night." Bischoff not standing his ground and saying tonight is the night because Sting didn't look, quote unquote, to be in the right mindset. I think that's part of what killed WCW. I will say that. I think Hogan being afraid to lose his spot after everything he did for them killed WCW. Part of it. There's a lot more that goes into it. But let's talk about Starcade 97 and how they had the wrestling world, in my opinion, in the palm of their hands. Even if you weren't a WCW fan, you knew what Sting and Hogan were doing, and you wanted to see this pay-per-view. You're going to go to your buddy's house or your family's house, or you're going to order it yourself. You wanted to see Starcade 97 because it was finally paying off this 18-month angle. And then they gave us what they gave us. Juice.
Yeah.
WCW 90, Starcade 97. What happened?
I would like to add one quick point. You guys mentioned like how this might be the best version of the story that we get to hear. And I did listen to another podcast where Brian Gewirtz mentioned that much like the Last Dance Michael Jordan documentary series, they are showing footage of other people's responses to the eulogy or other, who killed whatever, who put blame to the other people in the show. So I didn't know that. Thank you. I do believe we'll see that going forward. Now that being said, 97, I think personally, and look, I was 4 years old. Don't mistake that for anything, but I'm telling you, I feel, even looking back, and my earliest memories are from when I was 4. So I would like to think that across the board, WCW, WWF, ECW, arguably the best overall year for pro wrestling. And to have Starcade 97 be the end, and it should have been this perfect bow ending. I believe DDP said it the best. You could mess up the entire match. Don't mess up the finish. What did they do? They had too many cooks in the kitchen. Nick Patrick was supposed to do a fast count. Again, I'm only going by what every other account of this is. Hogan must have been like, look, hey, Sting doesn't look this way. Let's not do a fast count. And whatever ended up happening, what we saw is just ridiculous. It's annoying. It's frustrating rewatching it. Even as the show goes off the air with them celebrating with Sting, you could just tell that it wasn't the right way. If it goes off clean, and Hogan lost clean to Goldberg, Hogan lost clean to Luger, couldn't lose clean to Sting. Even when they ran it back at Super Brawl 8, they didn't do it really that clean. So for whatever reason, it just didn't land. And I think that was one of the first true fumblings when they had it all, that if they hit, it could have taken them. It could have given them another year or two, even. And I know that doesn't sound like much. But
No,
it
yeah, listen, you're right. Eric Bischoff said the death of WCW, or who killed WCW, is the death by 1,000 cuts. And I thought to myself, it's not 1,000 cuts. I can name about 4 or 5, and that's it. And Hulk Hogan's, and Eric knows better than me. I'm just giving you my opinion. He said that, and obviously Eric has a big part of what happened to WCW and what ended up killing WCW. And Hogan's creative control clause is one of the major gashes, if you want to talk about a cut, that ended up killing WCW, in my opinion. Corey, Starcade 97, obviously tickets were sold well. The pay-per-view buy rates were through the roof, but the ending, which Juice talked about, really put a damper on this whole thing.
So, and much like Juice, dated himself, like I said, I was 13, and I went to Starcade 97. It was here in Washington, D.C. So I went, and let me tell you, I can remember this. Sitting there, I said, Hogan just won. That was the first thing I said. Hogan just won. There was no fast count. It was the most confusing thing, because I see Bret Hart walking down the aisle, and I'm like, well, what's Bret coming out here for? I remember saying, like I said, 13, I'm saying this because I'm like, Hogan just won. And then Bret's coming out here. I'm not having this go down like this again and all. And I'm sitting there like, but nothing happened. And they talked about, and I was so glad on the documentary when they talked about the confusion, how it left people. We were in there confused because a lot of people, they tried to use the spectacle of it being Starcade 97, and finally you got Sting versus Hogan to maybe hopefully cover that up. But a lot of people, and as they mentioned, you got the big celebration at the end. It covered it for that night. But then you start seeing people put out there, well, what happened? That really was the feeling with a lot of people.
When you could give wrestling fans a reason to tune into, or anybody a reason to tune into your programming the next day, that's a plus. When you can leave them questioning what happened, I don't know, that's also a plus. But when you leave people questioning an outcome of a match or an outcome of something that's going to take place, that's a problem. And that, to your point, Corey, you're 100% right. Blake Mitchmore, Starcade 97 did 1.9 million buys. Put that in perspective to what AEW does today. It's more than 10 times the business.
You better not tweet that out. I'll get revoked.
Right. So, I mean, again, we're not talking about AEW. This is WCW. But I will say, somebody, whether it's Juice or Corey or maybe even Ellis, I can't do it right now. What did Starcade 98 do in terms of buys? Because if it's higher than 1.9, I'd be shocked. And that's what this is. To Corey's point and Juice's point, this was one of the crumbling of the foundation that was WCW. They had all this momentum, and then all of a sudden they gave you this finish and this angle that was paid off poorly. The Bret signing was paid off poorly, and we started to see the crumbling of WCW. Ellis, I mentioned Hulk Hogan's creative control clause. Obviously, the business besides what Hulk Hogan did, his contract was well worth it. So I ask you, from one businessman to another, the creative clause contract, is that a detriment to WCW?
No, I don't think it was. I'm going to be honest with you. Again, Bischoff said it. Why? I don't even like this dude. Like on a normal day, I want to talk shit about Eric Bischoff, right? And every other motherfucker on the street, right? But now I'm over here praising this guy because the reality,
He's like, why do I want to
flowers.
like Eric Bischoff?
But let me say this, okay? And you might disagree, and I don't really give a shit because guess what? He said it, and I agree. Sting is the reason the whole thing fell apart, not Hogan. He manifested that when he walked into the room. The issue wasn't Hulk Hogan's creative control. Hulk Hogan looked at Sting along with Bischoff, and they were like, what the fuck is going on? He manifested them. Let me finish. Yeah. He manifested the fact that, guess what? Someone's going to screw me over. He thought that. He walked into that room saying, Hogan's going to exercise his claws. That's what was said in the documentary that we're talking about today. And at the end of the day, the way he composed himself in that room caused them to question what the fuck was going on. And if he came in there confident, we would have had a whole different show.
The reason I wanted to jump in there was for this point only, and I was going to let you continue because you have a very valid point. Sting hadn't wrestled, I believe, for 18 months. Correct, Juice and Corey?
Yeah, he was done. Well, he wrestled in September '96 at Fall Brawl, and the following night he turned his back on the fans and was a free agent and dipped. So quite a long time.
To Ellis's point, Hogan and Bischoff thought. Months. Yeah, to Ellis's point, Hogan and Bischoff, for all of you that don't know, I like to give a little bit of the backstory because Ellis is spot on, and I don't like to interrupt people, but Sting did not look like the man he should have when he was 18 months out of the ring. He should have came back jacked, tan, and ready to roll, according to Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. And you could see it. A lot of people are like...
He was on TV, though. He was on TV, so I can't say...
But what I'm saying to Ellis's point, like when you think of somebody who's off television for that amount of time, all they got to do is live, eat, and breathe in the gym, right? And then show up to TV. So that's the backstory I wanted to give to paint Ellis's picture. They, according to what we saw, they walked into a meeting to discuss the finish, and they didn't like the way Sting looked. Ellis?
And so again, and I give Vice a lot of shit because they like to tell narratives, right? Okay? My opinion, because of businesses I've done outside with Vice, outside of wrestling. They tell narratives, and they tell really fucking good stories. And we believe that, guess what? They tell an unbiased story. Go back and watch that clip again. When they talk about how he manifested himself, look at how he walked to that ring. He walked to that ring defeated. So now we're going to go ahead and say,
you think he knew?
No, no matter what, he walked into that situation thinking he's going to get screwed. No matter what.
Maybe he heard what the finish was going to be and wasn't happy with it, and I don't blame him for that. And what we keep saying is they didn't like how Sting looked. Who's they? Bischoff and Hogan. Bischoff would not listen to anybody other than Hogan.
And here's the problem, and this is where this is my answer Drew's question the way I answered it. Is Hogan's contract the issue? No, it's the community and culture around the business who not wrestling business, but business in general, where rumors start. And again, any other business, that's a new manager. Or that's someone who got that bonus, or someone got that new position that no one knew about. How did he get that? What kind of power does he have over me? And people rumors happen in the workplace, and people get in a certain mindset. Well, I've been here for so long, I didn't get to where I want to be, and now something's going to happen, and they're in their own mind, they're fucking shit up themselves. And I hate this, but this is the reality of. I'm not talking about wrestling life. This is just life.
But
so if you manifest that shit, it's gonna fucking come true.
Sure, but Ellis, what I'm saying to you is that like this isn't, as we'll get into, this isn't the first time Hogan says it's not gonna work for me, brother. That's a problem when you're trying to make a company. Hulk Hogan helped build WCW. There's no doubt about that. And he took it to unprecedented heights. But when his time came to pass or help, he didn't want to do it. So the creative clause contract, to me, really, I think, killed WCW. That's part of it.
And I'm going to say culture killed WCW because at the end of the day, if if I'm in the situation, I'm in the main event, and I know I'm about to walk into the situation and I'm about to win the title, am I going to walk into the joint thinking listen to rumors.
Yeah,
because that
Yeah,
happens.
But it's tough. It's tough. Sting, I believe, has said that he wasn't in the best frame of mind around that time, and he said he might have, had some, as we all say, demons, and who knows really how he was going into that whole meeting. So if you're already going into a meeting, here's the thing. I'm not going to say it was just Hogan or just Sting. I think it's a combination of it. And like they mentioned in the doc, Eric Bischoff and Hogan were practically tied to each other, where Hogan has the creative control, but the guy to sign off on that is Bischoff. So I feel like if Hogan said, "Not for me, brother," Eric's going to say, "You know what? All right." And if he thinks maybe this is the right call, Hogan's been doing this a lot longer than me. I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, he's not going to piss off the bread and butter. He's not going to piss off the man that did everything. And also the thing is that, Ellis said to this point, I mean, it's in his contract. So if you're going to put it in the contract, he's going to, exercise it if he feels necessary. The contract is the problem, but you had to give him that in order to get him. So it's two evils here, right?
Yeah,
I
agree with that.
I really thought you were going to say bread and brother. I thought
You're talking about the guy who thinks Monday Night Nitro sounds better than Monday Nitro. So you're giving him way too much credit, Corey.
At Monday Night Nitro, it's just the way I like
Sorry,
it.
I know you're the host, Drew, but come on.
No, I mean, hey, whatever. It is what it is. I think it sounds better, but we could go Monday Nitro.
How does it sound better?
I just like it. Anyways, Starcade 1997 is one that will go down and live in history. This show ended the way it ended for a reason. The production company, they gave you the hooks. The hooks are in, right? Yep. We're all going to wait on bated breath for episode 2.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, from what we saw, all of you, and give me some predictions for what we're going to see. I'll start with you, Juice. Who killed WCW after episode 1? And then who do you think is going to end up being the one who killed WCW, or the ones that killed WCW at the end of this thing?
It's like Clue.
It is like Clue. Great movie, by the way. And first, I would like
the movie. It's a better game.
Oh my god! I'd like to give you the buy rates we were talking about real quick.
Starcade, do that, please.
Starcade 97 had 700,000 pay-per-view buys at a 1.9 buy rate, which is astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
Starcade 98 had 460,000 pay-per-view buys with a 1.15 buy rate.
So there you go.
And that was still a huge show.
Huge, but I mean, the drop is significant.
Yes, and I would even say Bash at the Beach 98, which had the Rodman-Malone interaction, 580,000 buys with a 1.5 buy rate, which is better than Starcade 98 and a couple of points short of Starcade 97. So the longer things went, the quicker the slope started to become of as Conrad and Tony Schiavone would say, a coffin on roller skates. But
I love it.
At the end of this first episode, it is very difficult for me to pinpoint someone who killed WCW. I think this whole series, the point of it will end up being like the name of this show was made that way because nobody can really pinpoint one person. Everybody, I'm gonna predict that in this whole 4-episode series, you killed it, they killed it. They're gonna show footage of other people saying you killed it. And no one's going to come to an agreement because
what does Juice think? What does Juice think? Because
I think for a long time, the creative control, which you said, Drew, you can't get Hogan if you don't have him sign a specific deal. So that kind of hurt. I think guaranteed contracts hurt to an extent of why, when we have 48 members of the NWO, are they all getting paid this amount of money to where they don't need to be on TV? They're getting paid. They're never going to leave. Like the oversaturation of it. I think Eric Bischoff has a lot to do with it. He got burnt out by the end. A lot of people give Vince Russo the blame, and who knows if he could have ever saved it. So I think potentially Eric Bischoff was the guy who helped get WCW to the stratosphere and was ultimately one of the – I can't say one person did it, but I would say the highest percentage of the people that killed WCW, I would say Eric Bischoff probably, unfortunately, is – the biggest percentage of that as well. But we'll see. We'll see what they say.
All right, Ellis. Who do you think after episode 1 killed WCW? And I mean, we could predict, I think, like Juice said, until we're blue in the face. It's the $1 million question, right? The Rock, Conan, everybody's blaming other people. The executives are blaming the talent. Talent's blaming the executives. Goldberg's blaming Russo. Bret's blaming Bischoff. It doesn't matter. Death by 1,000 cuts. What does Ellis think of Who Killed WCW episode 1? And what do you think, in your opinion, or who do you think killed WCW?
First of all, getting The Rock's opinion about who killed WCW is like asking Ja Rule's opinion. So
damn,
it's real shit. I said it. A good story is being told here. I love the fact that they're touching certain aspects and giving certain aspects certain amount of attention, because again, it almost feels as if at the end of the day, certain bubbles will be bigger than others in the discussion, and there will be multiple things, and discussion will move forward. But if I were to give my answer on who killed WCW, it was Ted Turner.
Why? Why Ted?
At what point do you think I'm going to keep investing something that's failing? You didn't have that foresight.
Yeah. So you think the merger?
No, fuck the merger. The merger just made it happen because they had smarter people, business people in play. At what point do you think I want to sign that many contracts with that kind of money? There's a return on investment you need. So at the end, you can have the biggest check in the world. People talk about Tony Khan. He has all the money in the world. You need to have a certain level of business acumen to make that money work for you. And this man had his emotions drive his decisions. He wanted to beat Vince.
Ted?
When in reality, yes.
Ted? Okay.
When in reality, he wanted to beat Vince. In reality, he should have focused on his organization. He had so many other properties to focus on growing. The reality is, again, as much as we're wrestling fans, and my man here has an entire WCW uniform, that motherfucker should have been, this whole shit should have been killed back when, I'm not getting a return on anything. Now this is bleeding. Did you go to business school? Have you had any other business knowledge? Yeah, you made tons of money later on, but how much more did it fail? The fact that AOL, the first thing they did was kill it. The fact that no one else wanted that shit. There's stories that that'll be cleared up in episode 4 probably, or episode 3. But the point is, if you're a smart business person with that kind of money, you would never spend the amount on Big Boss Man. Get the fuck out of here, dude. Are we serious?
No,
get these lines off my P&L, bro.
Yeah, you're right. And the profit and loss sheet was probably very, very long. But what I will say to this is, to your point, if you're looking at this from that aspect, which is it's a really interesting point, and it's a really interesting way of thinking, where you think Ted is the reason why WCW is dead. 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, WCW was profitable. 2000 and 2001, they were not. So, I mean, you really go back and look at it, and I'm not sure the full 99, but I think half of 99, I'd have to go back and get the numbers. Yeah. But I know from 95 to 98, they were 100% in the profitability stratosphere. So it's an interesting way of looking at it, Ellis. I can't argue with it, because at some point Ted was like, I just can't keep hemorrhaging money. You're right. I mean, you can't keep hemorrhaging money, and he was hemorrhaging money at one point, and a lot of it from 2000 to 2001.
And I'm pretty curious. We talked about Ted Turner. That was a great call. I like the fact that his son is on there. I don't know if he's ever even done any sort of television or series like this. So yeah, as we progress on through the series, and then we'll discuss about it even further, maybe he has some insight that, we're not privy to, that might give Ellis some more credence to that theory.
I would have loved to have seen Ted. I know Ted's 85, but a lot of people think Ted Turner's dead. He's not dead. Ted's
he's
well.
not really in the public eye anymore.
No, so maybe he's got something going on with him that he doesn't want to be shown, and I get that.
He's fucking
God
frozen,
bless
dude.
him.
He's frozen,
He's
waiting for them to defrost him when the world ends, man. He's fucking
Corey. He's fucking frozone. Is that what you're telling me? Corey, who killed WCW in your opinion from episode 1, and then in your eyes, who are they trying to blame in episode 1, or who are they trying to pass the buck to? And then in your opinion, who killed WCW?
It seems as though as much as they tried to paint Eric in the limelight of that, and originally, it seems like from episode 1, a lot of the blame is getting shifted to him. But I will say this, as far as overall, like I said, we're definitely going to see as this progresses. And just want to say, appreciate everybody listening in, chatting. This has been great. We can be on for the next 4 weeks, recapping all of these. So definitely tune in the next couple of weeks as well. We'll be doing this. As far as who killed WCW, I don't know what one person will be tied to this the most, but I'm going to say the creative killed it. And the reason why I'm going to say that is because when they got to the point where and this is later on, but the finger poke of doom happens, the switching of the NWO where you didn't know who was in what NWO at what time, and them, giving away the results later on during the Attitude Era of giving away the results of Raw. And the most famous one obviously is, something to the tune of almost 500,000-600,000 people changing the channel when they say Mick Foley's going to win the championship. The creative aspect of them trying to keep up with WWF once they lost after 83 weeks, I think is what killed WCW.
And I'd like to add a quick point to that, Corey. They always say cash and creative, the 2 C's. Once the creative stopped being great, there was no more cash to be given or made.
Wow.
So
Bingo.
There's that.
You're waiting for the last dab? Well, there it is. Hot ones. Go get your last dab.
Wow.
I have a ton.
Wow, was that worked in? Was that
No, it was not. I had to go grab.
Switch cameras.
I love hot sauce, so I have the last dab. Shout out to Hot Ones. Listen, Corey, the creative is always something that will both drive and decline the business. There's no doubt about it. If there's no creative, if you can't invest the time and people's emotions into something, people aren't going to watch. Look at how hot WWE is right now because people are investing into their things. They're investing into their storylines. They want to be in the building. It is something that does not go unnoticed. For me, episode 1, everybody killed WCW according to what we saw. That's what we're seeing right now. The one person that hasn't been blamed for it, realistically, is Bischoff, which is interesting. I want to see how this progresses with Eric. Who killed WCW, in my opinion? There's a lot of factors here. There's a lot of factors. The creative control killed WCW. The contracts killed WCW. And the egos killed WCW. And the biggest one out of all of them, there's 4 for me. The biggest one is the merger with AOL and Time Warner. Yep. That was it. Done. AOL Time Warner was like, we're done with this shit. Get it off our properties, get it off our books, get it off of everything. We're done with it. I like Ellis's Ted Turner. I like Corey's creative. And I like what you said too. I mean, it's all factors here. It really is. Juice, let's give you the couple seconds here to promote. You have a good podcast. In my opinion, there's a lot of garbage nonsense out there. I believe you have a journalism degree. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I do. And I only use it for this show and all these shows, to be fair.
So I do enjoy the Juice Box, but do yourself a favor and promote here. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Juice Box. Every single Friday, there's a new episode, and you can follow me on Twitter at JuicySteen. I talk whatever happened in the last week. I'll dive into old school stuff, of course. Then I'll do these types of shows any time that I really get a chance to. I appreciate you having me on, Drew, Corey, and Ellis. It's really nice to talk with you guys again. The Twitter Spaces were always fun, but this is a little bit more professional, and this is something that I really look forward to continuing with you guys. So thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to doing more than just WCW, but this is a hell of a first start, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Juice, I love that you sell yourself, and I appreciate that. But I will say that I enjoy the back and forth on social media with you. You're an educated wrestling fan. Your takes on WCW are always something that I enjoy. And we had a little discussion this morning, and I want to build more off of that with, I believe, a company should head to Hammerstein Ballroom, but that's a topic for another day. Yeah. Corey, you do stuff with BRP. I love the guys and girls over at BRP. Why don't you talk about what you guys do?
So I'm on Tuesday nights with Under the Black Wrestling Podcast for Turnbuckle Talk, and we recap the things of the past week or so in wrestling, but we really give a chance to let people vent off of what they got to say, and we just follow on from there. So every Tuesday at 6:35 Eastern, we're on. But my Kicks and My Fix, I'm here on Twitter or X rather, and on IG. I collect belts, I collect sneakers. I've been a wrestling fan all my life, and I always tell people it's a funny story. I always tell them I can say I met Ric Flair in the bathroom at the Stadium Armory. At the Stadium Armory, let's just stop here. But at the DC Armory when I was 5 years old in 1989, and I remember looking at him. I'm like, that's Ric Flair at 5 years old. And the first thing
let me take a piss, kid.
The first thing I thought in my head was, he's not bleeding. I kid you not. Because at that point in 1989, at 5 years old, all I knew Flair for was bleeding. That's what he always did.
I mean, he's still doing it in 2024. So make sure you guys follow Juice. Make sure you follow Corey. Corey has an insane sneaker collection, an insane belt collection, and he also does a really good job on Tuesdays with Turnbuckle Talk. Big fan of what they do over there. Hey, Ellis.
What's up?
You want to promote Final Bell Media, baby? What do you want to do here?
No,
Nothing?
I don't want to do that. So don't follow my ass.
He says this all the time.
No, I'm serious. I'm not going to look shocked for you. This is my fucking face, you motherfuckers. Don't come and say, "Oh, you make the face." Just the fuck up, right? I watch.
He doesn't have glasses.
I can say as a human witness that people do that to him. And
man.
Do they really?
Yeah, man. I'm like, fuck up. I'm a grown ass man.
Yo, you got that white shirt on under there. Shut up.
No, man. It's actually in the memory box. But check us out. So, and I make Drew look pretty on video supposedly. So check us out.
Dude, fastest editor in the game.
Whatever. But check out Final Bell Media. Follow the website. If you go to finalbell.media, you'll see our temporary page. You want to learn more about what we're doing. How everything is launching. Sign up, put your email in there. That'll be the home for articles, additional content. We're on TikTok, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram. Be on the lookout for unique innovation when it comes to streaming. So we're doing a 16:9 stream right now. Wait until we start doing 9:16 streams on TikTok, on Instagram stories. Things are happening, and guess what? I'm just making it happen for free here. But if you really do want my help, go to pivotalnewmedia.com. That's my business. I do charge for this shit. None of this is free. And when Drew critiques my work, I say, "Bitch, are you paying me?" And then you say, "What? No, I'm not paying you, Ellis. This is great work." And that's how the conversations typically go. Anyway, so follow Final Bell everywhere. Don't follow me because I'm not a nice person, you motherfuckers. Go ahead, Drew.
Man, time is money. Talent makes money. That's all I'll tell you. All right, so I don't pay for it in cash, but hey, listen, make sure you follow Final Bell Media. Make sure you follow Ellis, even though he tells you not to. He's a great human being. Make sure you follow Corey. He's a great human being. And Juice, follow him too. He's all right. No, I'm only kidding. Juice is a good human being. I've known Juice for a very long time. All these guys are good human beings. And in a landscape that a lot of people don't know how to be good human beings, in a landscape that a lot of people like to scream, shout, and wiggle about, whatever you want to call it, they squirm, they do this, they do that. We're having adult-based conversations here, and everyone's opinion is welcome. I appreciate the love and support. We had over 500 people here. I see this. I'm getting checks from Hot Ones, not AEW. Yeah, that makes sense. This guy popped. I got people on social media now saying I'm Sean Evans' brother. So we'll have to do that. We are going to launch more shows. I will be alongside Corey. We'll be in the door at the Forbidden Door. We'll be on Long Island at UBS Arena. I will be in the post-show media scrum. You can find that content on Final Bell Media. We will be live broadcasting the media scrum there. So make sure you guys hit that like, follow, and subscribe button. This was a blast. I thank you, Juice. I thank you, Corey. I thank you, Ellis. Ellis, I'm going to talk to you right after this. I'm going to tell you we need more videos. You're going to tell me to go to hell. Anyway, exactly. This was a blast. I look forward to it. And I want to thank everybody for doing this with us and for joining us on this ride. It's going to be a hell of a ride, and I look forward to the future. And we'll see you this time again for episode 2 on Who Killed WCW.